Hello, and welcome to Informs' webinar, The Importance of Data Literacy in Today's World, where we will be exploring the importance of data literacy to America's future. We will talk about new legislation to address America's data literacy crisis and how increasing access to data science and statistics education can help secure a brighter future for all. My name is Jeff Cohen. I'm the Chief Strategy Officer at Informs, the largest association for the data and decision sciences. Informs members support organizations and governments at all levels as they work to transform data into information and information into insights that lead to better decision-making and more impactful results. Data science and statistics-related jobs are among the fastest growing and most highly rated jobs in the United States. But America has a data literacy crisis that threatens our shared security and prosperity. Data literacy is the ability to read, understand, interpret, and engage with and communicate data. Alarmingly, the growth of jobs requiring data literacy in the United States is outpacing the pipeline of students who can fill them, putting our economic and national security at risk, let alone our ability to lead an AI-driven future. This requires a new national commitment to data literacy education in Washington, D.C. and beyond. Today, we are joined by Laura Albert, the 2023 president of Informs, and Bonnie Ghosh-Dastidar, the 2024 American Statistical Association president, to discuss the importance of increasing America's data literacy and efforts in Congress to do just that. Thank you both for joining us today. Laura, perhaps I could begin with you. We touched on this a bit in the introduction, but not everyone has a full or the same understanding of what data literacy means. Can you explain data literacy, data science, and statistics?
I'm going to do my best. I thought you described it quite well in the introduction in referring to data literacy as the ability to find, read, understand, interpret, and communicate data. So individuals that are data literate can, evaluate the quality and reliability of data, ask informed questions about data, and effectively communicate data-driven findings to others. Those who are data literate are not necessarily data scientists and able to manipulate the data, write code, and implement statistical methods in machine learning. So that brings me into my definition of data science. And I will acknowledge that there's not a standard definition of data science yet. One way to think about data science is that it combines math, statistics, programming, advanced analytics, artificial intelligence, and machine learning to manipulate and manage the data, and ultimately to uncover insights from the data. And it Informs, we're interested in data analytics, which is the science of transforming data into insight to drive better decisions using a number of advanced analytical methods such as machine learning, AI, and optimization. I'm going to defer to Bonnie to define statistics, although I'm happy to give my a definition. Bonnie?
Thanks, Laura. I thought those were really great definitions of kind of distinguishing between data literacy and data science. So just to start with a quote by the famous statistician Fred Mosteller, statistics is the art and science of gathering data, analyzing, and then making inferences from data. I would think of it as a slightly more specialized and technical skill than data literacy, where data literacy, I think, is broader and more general and applies to the broader population. The capacity to interrogate data with critical thinking is often considered as a predictor of statistical literacy, the foundation of critical thinking with data. The data interrogation often involves 4 steps, 4 critical sort of responses, including communicating, understanding, evaluating, and decision-making. In another article by someone called Rob Gould, an eminent statistician, how we define statistical literacy, which lacks maybe a consistent definition, is to just set some criteria for statistical literacy. And I'll highlight a few. It's understanding how to formulate investigative questions that anticipate variation in the data, understands who collects the data, how it arises, and how it can be used. knowing how to create some basic descriptives using the data, knowing how to analyze and interpret the data from both random and non-random or convenience samples, and finally, acknowledging and being able to quantify the uncertainty that exists in the data, often in the data generating, analysis, and models. So that's a pretty detailed definition of statistical literacy, but just to set it apart slightly from data literacy and data science, even though there's overlap across the three.
Thank you both. So, Bonnie, let me sort of build on what you were just describing. Why are these disciplines so important to be a part of the core education for children at an early age, which seems a little bit of a different approach than certainly somebody of my age and when I was first introduced to statistics in my education?
So I think the one thing that's different for you, Jeff, and myself is that now data are ubiquitous. We are surrounded by data. We live in an information-centered world, and people, the average person, has to make sense of enormous quantities of data that they are both contributing to and that surround them. So today's world is very different than the world we started in, I would say. As a result, every student needs to develop the ability to analyze, explore, read, and communicate data. This has just become a basic and necessary skill. And that makes data literacy an essential skill. And I think the one way to enable our student to be prepared for today's world is through data literacy as a part of core education. Like mathematical skills, sound data literacy and statistical skills don't develop overnight. They take a long time to develop to the point that they become intuition or second nature. They cannot be honed to the level necessary in today's world in just 1 or 2 high school courses. As a result, the best way to help people attain, say, statistical literacy is to begin statistics education early, that is in elementary school, and keep strengthening and reinforcing concepts, approaches, how to actually approach the data, how to understand the data, how to understand concerns around data privacy and confidentiality, touch on those topics throughout middle and high school. As you're familiar, and I have teenagers, Jeff, is that, they interact with social media and they're sharing a lot of data about themselves on a daily basis. It's really important that they be savvy data users. Along those lines, I'd say similar thinking applies for data literacy. That too takes a long time to build. Sound data and statistical literacy are an ongoing process in terms of building. And by exposing children to these concepts at an early age, I believe we're better equipping them for the future and for future jobs and the demands of workforce.
That's great. Thank you. Laura, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I really liked Bonnie's answer. One thing that I'll mention is that it's developmentally appropriate to start these skills early, even in preschool. You can imagine a preschool class or preschool teacher just asking the class by showing hands, what's your favorite flavor of ice cream, chocolate or vanilla? And that's a way to collect data from the class, from the students. Maybe create a bar chart or something to answer a question of what is the most preferred flavor of ice cream. It's a simple example, but it's really tangible to very young students. And that's how you can get started. I agree that the data science and data literacy skills are not grown overnight. They have to be built, and it has to be a core competency where students are exposed to those methods over time. What's really important about including data literacy as a core competency is if students are exposed regularly and across different subjects, not just in math class, they are going to be motivated to pursue further education, potentially data science or related careers. It will spark an interest perhaps for STEM disciplines. And this really creates talent pipelines that we can see in the decades to come that will, of course, fill the demand for jobs. As you pointed out, the demand is not keeping pace, or the supply is not keeping pace with the demand right now. But more than that, it's really the recipe for innovation. The US boasts science and technology leadership. in innovation. That's really the foundation for our economic well-being. And we need to make key investments to make sure that we maintain that leadership.
Well, that's a great segue into the next part of our agenda, and that is the Data Science and Literacy Act was introduced in Congress in early 2023 by Representatives Haley Stevens, Jim Baird, Don Beyer, and Young Kim. And certainly the American Statistical Association played a key role in developing that, and Forms was delighted to work with ASA in helping to bring this forward. But perhaps we could talk about what this legislation, what this bipartisan legislation would do, and why it's so important. Laura, if you want to sort of build on what you were saying before.
Sure. This act would authorize $10 million annually for schools from the pre-K level all the way up to 2- and 4-year colleges to increase access to data science and literacy education. And it would leverage data science literacy as a primary strategy to increase representation and diversity in emerging technology. And it would give some funding for schools to ensure that, data science and data literacy and statistics education is broadly available. It would promote the professional development for teachers for developing some learning materials, and it would expand access to STEM classes.
That's great. That was pretty thorough. But Bonnie, is there anything that you want to add from your perspective?
So to continue, if I may pursue a bit, Jeff, what I was saying before is to make an analogy. There's tremendous amounts of literature that shows inequities in reading skills, for example. So kids exposed to reading at home in preschool, or that have access to preschool, do really well in reading in elementary school and onwards. Similar rationale applies to data literacy skills that students need to be exposed from an early age to really build the intuition, understanding, and ability to interpret and work with data. So the Data Science and Literacy Act, I think what it does amazingly is kind of close gaps that might emerge in the future in who can work with data and who can't. And it provides tremendous job opportunities for data savvy students, builds a curiosity and an interest in STEM fields. So it really helps and builds schools that provide statistics and data science education to meet the demands of the workforce of today and tomorrow.
So speaking of the workforce of today and tomorrow, what professions are suffering the most from a lack of data literacy, data science, and statistics, and what are the implications to those sectors? And Bonnie, why don't I start with you?
Thanks, Jeff. So it's hard to think of a sector or profession that isn't impacted with data, directly or indirectly. Data literacy impacts every aspect of business and commerce, which are foundational to our economic well-being. Professions and sectors such as healthcare, agriculture, if you think of data from on weather reports, increasingly, data dependent, and so much data that can inform sort of patterns for farmers. Manufacturing, finance, tech, also vulnerable sort of fields like national security and intelligence. They are all increasingly reliant on data. In 2022, Forbes ranked data literacy as the second most in-demand skill in the next 10 years. We're seeing consistent demand and growth for data-related skills. In fact, data scientists and statisticians are among the fastest growing, most highly rated occupations, with expected growth rate of 35% and 32% in the next 10 years, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics. Further, to illustrate the demand for employees with data literacy, students today become the employees of tomorrow. My ASA colleagues did a Google search for data science jobs in Indiana. That's far from Silicon Valley, where you might imagine a lot of data literacy necessity in tech sector. But this is a little bit away from that in Indiana. So Eli Lilly, state of Indiana, advertised multiple positions, but the demand goes beyond these large employers and tech companies. In fact, the LinkedIn entry showed 817 jobs with a variety of titles in just the capital when this search was conducted. And if you focus in on one employer, even a large employer like Caterpillar, they found over 300 jobs around the world involving data, data science, or some such title in the job description. So I think what we see is this real need for data literacy across all sectors, industries, and companies.
Laura?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Data literacy is needed beyond the tech, engineering, and science sectors. In every facet of our society, we see businesses and organizations relying on data to make informed decisions. And that can occur when there's widespread data literacy. In the past, perhaps, organizations have relied on just a few individuals within the organization to really leverage the data. And in the future, I see that not really being the case. We're going to need a wider cross-section of those employees to leverage the data to lead to breakthroughs and innovation. If there's one sector that I'm maybe worried about the most, it's the government sector, perhaps particularly in national security. And this is because this sector has been plagued by staffing shortages in the recent past, and particularly when these positions require advanced degrees, such as master's and PhD degrees, along with citizenship requirements. So there's a real need for our national security to be able to have a pool of employees to attract to those security jobs.
So let's pull on that thread just a little bit more. We've sort of talked around it, but can you talk about how increasing data literacy, America's data literacy, really helps the United States remain globally competitive and strengthens our economic and national security? And I'd like to, and I know you were just talking about that, Laura, but I think this is important enough that we need to put a fine point on this point.
Yeah, absolutely. We need a data literate workforce. We need data literate policymakers, and we need a data literate populace. And to get there, it starts with education. And we're seeing this ubiquity of data that organizations and businesses are relying on data to make informed decisions. And they can do that when there's widespread data literacy. And to really be able to develop that talent, it starts with some education. It starts with exposing more students to the tools, sparking the interest so they pursue follow-up educational opportunities and ultimately have an interest in those jobs. So it's about that, developing those talent pipelines. Starting at an earlier age, it can mean that there's a kind of wider swath of students and that later become the workforce to meet those needs.
Bonnie, anything that you'd like to add to that?
So I just like to second what Laura said. I think it's a really great point. And this was also made earlier. We're building a pipeline and it takes a while. It takes years of education, to reinforcing concepts and notions to build a data literate, a student body that translates into the workforce of tomorrow. So just a few examples, like for example, if you had a data literate employee that could identify and access the data they need to complete business tasks, productivity of an organization goes up, right? When businesses can gain insight into customer preferences and behavior, customer satisfaction and loyalty goes up, sales go up, and that's really important. Innovation can also improve through data literacy, as Laura said. When data literate employees can use data to identify patterns that inform the development of new products and services, you can innovate in necessary areas. Your competitive advantage increases. Most importantly, employees with higher levels of data literacy have critical thinking skills that are well developed and better equipped to use data to make informed decisions, I would say, across the organization.
Thank you. So we're recording this the same week that the United States and China were meeting in San Francisco, talking about a host of issues. But everything you're saying, I think, reminds me that the United States is not facing this challenge alone, and in fact, in a global landscape that is both collaborative in some cases and competitive in other cases, there's a race on data literacy and data science, particularly in the age of AI. And I'm wondering if you could both talk about, from your perspectives, how other countries are addressing these challenges, these fields, these opportunities? And Bonnie, I'll go ahead and start with you.
The first thing that I think we're all aware of is that other countries are investing in STEM education, investing billions of dollars or billions of their currency in building a workforce of tomorrow. So, similar investments need to be made here. That just makes simple sense. It's really hard to be completely comprehensive about sort of different initiatives or how other countries approach, because there's so many, but I'll give a few examples. For such as in Canada, our neighboring country, Statistics Canada, the National Statistical Agency, has committed to sharing knowledge and expertise to help all Canadians develop data literacy skills. So it's a national initiative for the population, available to all, being worked on by the National Statistical Agency, that's Stats Canada. The goal is to provide learners with information and basic concepts and skills about a range of data literacy topics. Another example is GIST, the Global Innovation Through Science and Technology Organization, which is a consortium of international and regional organizations engaged in statistical training. They're aiming to build sustainable statistical capacities through efficient, effective, harmonized delivery of training at different levels, global and regional. In terms of early education, I would say what is common is a focus in teacher professional development, and it was found that in a study where two cohorts or two groups of teachers were followed across time, that the teachers with greater exposure to statistical and data literacy and that used that in their professional development had better outcomes and were able to explain and train on concepts around AI much better. So these are foundational skills also to be working with artificial intelligence, which is already available. Another example is access to projects like census at schools and experiments at school that allow students to have authentic experiences. And maybe I'll just close out with another example of curriculum development that's ongoing. That's New Zealand's new curriculum with a refreshed mathematics and statistics learning series, which is an excellent example centering around numeracy is the word that they use. Building data literacy is what I might call it. And this is being unveiled and unraveled as we speak. And this is going to happen in the next couple of years, that they will adopt this as a national curriculum. So as you see across the globe, countries are thinking about how to build a data literate body of students, leading to a data literate workforce of tomorrow.
Thanks, Bonnie. Laura, anything that you want to add to Bonnie's great description of what some other countries are doing?
I don't have too much to add, but I will, piggyback on this idea that the other countries are really investing billions of dollars in education, especially earlier education. And that's in both the developed and the developing world. Countries such as Nigeria, Jordan, Nepal, and Sudan have all started programs in the past 5 years or so, sometimes partnering with universities to really develop the students and the future workforce to be ready for these opportunities with data.
So we've talked about all the reasons that America and Congress should take action and focus on data literacy. But what is the consequence of not doing anything? And Laura, maybe I'll turn to you first.
Yeah, for me, when I think about the consequences, it's really losing our leadership in science, technology, and AI, and innovation in that space. Being able to really be competitive and to maintain that leadership is predicated on the fact that we've prepared our future workforce to be leaders and to innovate. And to maintain that leadership, we need to educate the workforce of tomorrow with sufficient data literacy skills. And we run the risk of ceding that ground in science and technology leadership if we don't create this pipeline of future workers that can lead in that innovation and help us maintain our leadership.
Thank you, Laura. Bonnie?
I want to applaud Laura for that comment. I think it's so on point. Again, it's a reminder, we are In an information-centric world, a data-centric world where data literacy and ability to leverage that data, that infinite quantities of data, will lead to innovation, productivity, and success and a competitive edge. Low data literacy skills, if we were not to act or a result of inaction, will impact our economy through lost productivity, reduce insight into consumer preferences and behaviors, a lack of ability to make optimal decisions, kind of the opposite of sort of the examples I gave before of the benefits of data literacy. It does threaten global competitiveness and national security, and everyday Americans, businesses, and the broader economy, and especially national security. To expound upon national security as an example, two key consequences will include weakened intelligence. Data literacy is fundamental for intelligence agencies dealing with tons of information from various sources. Imagine not having analysts with expert ability to distinguish reliable information from noise to fostering more precise conclusions. Another example is that's really critical to our national security is diminished threat detection and prevention that may result. Inaction could lead to reduced ability for national and cybersecurity professionals to discern patterns and anomalies within intelligence reports. So all of these are just examples to talk about the great dangers of a lack of action or inaction.
Thank you. You've painted a compelling reason why Congress should continue to work on this issue and foster a greater environment of data literacy for all of our citizens. And thank you both for your leadership on this issue. This has been a really important conversation. It's been an interesting conversation, and I hope it won't be the last of these conversations. And so for those of you watching today, and if you would like to know more about Informs or the American Statistical Association and how our members can help you either understand the Data Science Literacy Act better or other elements related to the data and decision sciences and evidence-based policymaking, please reach out to me. My email is jcohen@informs.org. It'll be on the screen. It'll be my pleasure to connect you with Laura or Bonnie to have these conversations, as well as the thousands of other Informs members who possess expertise on a wide variety of other issues that leverage statistics, data science, analytics, and math and science that can help policymakers create more impactful policies on behalf of the American people. Thank you for tuning in.